The Communist Party, also better known as the CCP, had many goals spanning over numerous decades. They follow a similar ideal to Marxist and communist beliefs, believing that individual property is something that we should not have. They also believe that the lower class were being oppressed by the upper class, usually seen through their ideas of class struggle. They also wanted to remove the Western influence from China and bring it back to the past glory that it once had. Similar to the Russian Revolution, the communists completely wanted to revolutionize the social and economical systems. This then conflicted with the other party of the GMD, or the Nationalist Party, who wanted more democratic systems in China. Basically, the GMD was more sponsored by the US, and think of it more as nearing the USA's ideals. They still wanted to get rid of foreign influence, but they were far more capitalistic and far more democratic. While the CCP is much more like Russia, more communist and more dictatorships there. This caused the Civil War, kind of the split between the GMD and the CCP. During this Civil War, there was an event called the Long March, where the CCP trekked across 10,000 kilometers of rough terrain to hide out in the mountains from the dominant GMD at the time, who was really like beating them pretty badly in this war. And then during this like long march, the CCP lost like 100,000 people, but they really did gain an important leader by the name of Mao Zedong. This connects with the Second Sino-Japanese War, which we know as World War II, because the CCP was up in the mountains during the war, and while they did have a truce with the GMD during that time, they were pretty well off, hidden up in the mountains, letting the GMD do most of the fighting, which cost them a lot of the soldiers and their popularity, as they were forced to raise taxes to compete, like no, to compete with the Japanese and to allow them to continue fighting. And then, after this Sino-Japanese War, the Second Sino-Japanese War, the CCP was able to take over the GMD through a lot of different techniques, such as mass line, which was where they talked with the peasants, gaining lots of rural popularity. Through this rural popularity and through the use of guerrilla warfare, which saw them more of fighting, less in a traditional style, but more in a kind of hit and run tactic, where they targeted a lot of the GMD supply lines and kind of tried to isolate them in their more populous urban areas. And then this eventually caused them to win the Civil War, and they eventually took over all of China. And then there was a lot of social changes caused by the CCP's takeover. It affected the role of everyone, but it really did affect the role of women, as they were expected to become workers and also mothers. They did get more rights though. At the beginning, they were allowed to own property, they were allowed to divorce, and they were allowed to do a lot of things that they had been previously. But this is kind of part of all of the overall changes seen throughout China during this time, as there was massive widespread changes that would eventually lead to further conflicts and further instability in China.